Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates of Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Josh Bryant. Coach Bryant has worked all over the United States, following his passion to help people become the strongest version of themselves. He became the youngest person to bench 600 pounds raw, won the strongest man in America in 2005, and totaled 2294 at the USPF Mountaineer Cup. Bryant started training clients at the world-famous Metroflex Gym. These clients range from Olympia bodybuilders, world-renowned strength athletes, and more traditional athletes like football and baseball players. Coach Bryant has built a very successful online coaching program and has authored over a dozen Amazon best-selling books on strength and fitness. He has further transitioned into creating personal training certification courses for ISSA, hosting seminars on strength and mindset worldwide. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Hey, thanks for being on. I appreciate it.
So you've really sold out for this. I mean, this is definitely your passion. You've been all over the country working with everybody. Where did you kind of find out that this is what you wanted to do?
I would say probably in 7th or 8th grade when I started working. I mean, I was working at the YMCA all the time and all that stuff then. And at 16 years old, I got a job managing a hardcore bodybuilding powerlifting gym. So what I would do is after like practice and stuff, I'd work there at nights. I'd work there on weekends. So, and I was writing programs for like all the bouncers and all sorts of like pretty strong guys in high school because I worked out with a powerlifter named Steve Hall. And so they were trying to basically kind of get that and saw what I was doing. So I was working with like grown men, you know, when I'm 16 years old. So I've just really never done anything else.
Yeah, so you got a crash course pretty quick, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Now, from there, you went on to work with Dr. Hatfield, and compensatory acceleration came into the picture. Getting athletes to understand that and put full effort into reversal and speed of the bar.
Right.
A young athlete trying to understand that, where do you kind of start?
Well, obviously, I think the first and foremost, you got to make sure someone's technique's okay to, you know, at that, assuming it's good to go. I think it's all about at that point, you know, teaching about the intention of what to do, of like actually doing the lift as explosively as possible. I mean, you don't need to like give them an advanced physics breakdown. Just, you know, I think people understand like, you know, force is mass times acceleration. So everybody looks at just the mass part of it, but you can also look at the acceleration part. And I don't think it's going to take somebody. I think you could pretty much explain it to anybody and they're going to understand it. So then it's the intention of doing it over and over again. I think you just have to tell, you know, if you're performing your reps that way, unless it's a really heavy weight, you're not going to get maximum adaptive overload or any kind of like real adaptive overload, get stronger past beginner gains. So when you like start doing that, like, you know, so somebody's like 5 sets of 5 on a squat, typically the first couple sets, they might not get any adaptive overload. Then they might, as like set 4 goes on, get some of the bottom half. Then by the end, like the last few reps, where so like total, you go a couple half reps, you know, 3 reps at the end, you got 4 reps out of 25 reps. So that'd be 16% is like maximal efficiency, maximum adaptive overload, but they could have had 100%. He thought that was the biggest difference between like elite level strength athletes and people that don't reach that level that could, is that like intuitively someone's taught them whatever, somehow they get it and apply it. And a lot of people may not have ever been taught that, but they kind of get that somehow, some way. And it usually obviously is going to yield them better gains. So, I mean, luckily now, I think it's for the most part, it's become more accepted. You know, on Twitter today, somebody was saying like, this is not science. Like you want to do everything slow and controlled and all this. And it was like somebody, you know, some sort of crypto kind of like, you know, sports performance, if you will, kind of guy that didn't really have a background. But I think now it's become more accepted. I think besides, you know, Dr. Fred Hatfield, Louis Simmons talked a lot about, you know, the speed days, and it was the same concept. And so Hatfield brought that on. He trained like Evander Holyfield, Lyle Alzado, and sort of all sorts of different individuals. Kind of like died down for a bit. Then Louis Simmons, you know, as the 90s rolled on, worked with I think the Green Bay Packers and some other people, and then kind of like people are starting to figure out it doesn't have to necessarily be an Olympic lift to build explosive strength. Obviously, you know, you're not going to do like a heavy clean slow, but these other lifts you're missing the bag on if you don't apply this technique.
Now, I don't know. I've been down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and if anybody can kind of answer it and get me in the right direction, I'm sure it's you. In my mind, I'm thinking right now that you can only reverse what you can absorb, whether that be through jumps or weights.
Right.
The max you can absorb is the max you can reverse. I mean, a mythical weight can't just appear. So,
Mhm.
improving absorption to improve reversal. There again, I don't know which comes first, chicken or the egg, but maybe you can get me on the right
I think a
lines.
lot of it's going to be just proper compensatory acceleration training. I don't think it's going to require especially early on, a whole lot of like specialized techniques, because with compensatory acceleration training, you are having, if you're squatting, unless there's some kind of hip or knee issue, you're not like doing a super slow descent. It's going to be a faster descent where you have to, ultimately absorb on the eccentric, and then you're going to have to reverse it. So I think like it's sort of like the deal with like mobility and stuff too. A lot of times people want to, not so much like traditional sports, but a lot like powerlifting and stuff, and even like tactical training, people will claim they're doing mobility and they're just foam rolling and stretching a little bit, but that's not really developing a whole lot because they're not doing it with any kind of force. So even if you can get in better positions, if you're too weak to do anything there, that could potentially be detrimental because you get hurt in that position or something. So I think a lot of times when you do things right, you get the right adaptations without having to do like all these kind of things, because these athletes and stuff, they're gonna have time to do like work on 500 different qualities when they could have been done the right way, just doing this the right way.
Obviously, you have a huge bench, and not every athlete that wants to work out is going to make it to the gym. But it seems to me that if coaches were better at building the bench press, maybe you could bring some more kids in, and then through proxy squat, you kind of get them through the door
Yeah.
with the sell of the big bench press. Building a big bench press in a high school kid, is that all going to come down to just the makeup of him, or where are some little things that we could really help these athletes?
Well, certainly the makeup of it, like, you could have a really good football player that's like 6'7", 240 defensive end with super long arms, that more than likely is not going to be the best bench presser ever. But you definitely can by, a lot of it's going to be building starting strength. Like you can do like things like dead benches and things like that without the eccentric, to teach them to really, build that starting strength fast off the chest. A lot of it's going to be stuff they like the more, and it's going to be protective for their sports if there's any kind of contact. If you build up the chest, the shoulders, the triceps, the upper back, you're going to bench more. And people like to build up those areas too because it looks good. But I think that's, there is that aspect of bodybuilding you could get a little bit of sell on, is like, okay, we need to do some accessories to target these areas. They think it's fun. Then you get more buy-in for sure. I think if you're trying to develop like, pressing strength or some sort of strength like that, and they like to bench press, why wouldn't you use the bench press? I think you want to, if you can get the adaptations that someone desires by using a methodology that they like, that's better than forcing them to do something they don't want to do for like, oh, well, I like to do, whatever, because it's slightly more functional or whatever, but you have no buy-in, like that's no good. So I would get the buy-in and program to their preferences, assuming it's not something crazy that's going to, not get the adaptations you want.
Getting ready for this, I sat down and watched one of your table talks with Dave Tate, and
Okay.
you guys got on a little bit of an area that I would think is difficult for a lot of coaches. The small guy that can't put on any size. What do coaches need to do to help that kid? He's watching the shorter, thicker kids get bigger and bigger and bigger, and here this kid's eating everything he can eat, and he just cannot get that size on.
First thing I'd have them do is so there's all sorts of studies. They're actually primarily on the opposite as weight loss. When people say, hey, how many calories are you eating, but they're not actually tracking it. Oh, I'm eating 2,000 calories a day. And you're like, wait a second, you weigh 250 and dropped a pound. Like, no way. They write it down, they're eating 4,200. So I think there's one study that just came out, and I don't recall who did it. I think it was on the Mass Research kind of summary journal. I read it on, if I'm not mistaken, but it was saying basically about 40%, one study found, was the average under eating. So basically, as my dad would say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think a lot of people, the opposite would, I just don't think there's much study on it. I'd imagine most of the time I always get people that say they eat this and that. When I used to work at Kennedale High School, there'd have kids that would tell me, coach would come to me and say, hey, so and so really wants to put on weight. Come talk to me. And then I just have them say, okay, great. Eating everything in sight. I wouldn't, you don't want to kind of, call them out, like there's no way. Like, okay, cool. Like, that's awesome. So let's see what we can maybe improve on. Don't change anything for the next 3 to 7 days. Pretend like we never talked and just eat normal and write down what you eat. And it's like, okay, skip breakfast, had like a granola bar, nutrition break, then like a sandwich for lunch, with 3 pieces of meat on it and 1 piece of cheese, and then whatever my mom made for dinner. And what was that? Oh, it was like, whatever. And you're not gonna gain weight that way. So most of the time, it could be probably remedied without doing any sort of changes to the training, because there obviously could be, they could get some extra work done, and it gets a little difficult in these high school settings because you have a limited amount of time. They may not like be so sold out that they're going to come do extra, So what I would do at Kennedale when I was there is I would have them do what I just said, then offer up corrections that were like suitable, not like, hey, you know what, you need to eat like, 16 ounces of chicken breast, a cup and a half of wild rice or something, is not going to happen. If we can, leverage the least amount of changes possible, they'll do it. Like, hey, let's add oh, you're not eating breakfast? Why not? Well, I got to school at 6:45 in the morning. Okay, great. Let's get you on a shake or something instead. That's not perfect, but it's so much better than, they start their day off with, 40 grams of protein there, 40 grams of carbs. It's a lot better start to the day than nothing. So we're already improved right there. Boom. Hey, what about that snack? Granola bar. Let's switch that granola bar to a protein bar. Maybe some almonds with it or something. So I'd make those small, subtle changes. And that would be kind of like how I would do it. And then I would have them come. I would say, hey, we have an athletic period, which is like mandatory. You have to come to that. But I'm going to stay here after school. So when I was there, I didn't have a sport. I was a strength conditioning coach. So what I would do is I'd say, hey, I'll be here till whatever time. I'll be here at 5:00 today. School's out at 2:45, whatever it was. I will be there. If you want to get better, I'm there. I'm sitting in the weight room. I'm not even working out myself or anything. I work out after. I'm doing nothing if no one shows up. Then we got a couple people showing up, started to get more and more showing up extra. So the good thing about that would be, since I'm running strength conditioning, I can coincide where we're not getting any kind of interference. Like if we did, say like heavy squats or something in the morning, there'd be, no reason to come back and just do endless heavy squats, kind of thing later. But if we got a little bit of bench work in, like you're talking about, we don't have enough dumbbells and stuff to like, say do lateral raises or some kind of accessory during the period, which is not the equipment or time. They could come later. Okay, we're gonna hit some lateral raises, we're gonna hit some, lat pull downs or pull ups or whatever, and get that extra work in. And then more and more people started coming in and kind of bought in that way, and we kind of built it from there.
With everything you've seen and everything you're around, do you ever get immune to watching guys lift heavy weights? Does it just get to where it's just commonplace now?
Yeah, it would be if you looked at it that way. I'll look at it more as like, I'm working with you to help you hit your goals. So if like, kind of it's funny, there was a guy from Hong Kong I was working with online, and he was stuck at 230, grown man, stuck at 231 pounds on the bench for like, he said 8 years or something crazy like that. And he got his bench up to like 248 in 12 weeks. He acted like he benched 800. And I was telling people, I went to lunch with a friend of mine. Like, he did 248. He was so excited. And I was all excited about it too. He's like, 248, that's, there's women that do that. Like, who cares, kind of thing. I'm like, I legitimately was super excited. So I guess I've gotten like to the point where their success was mine, and I'm like acting like a world record was set. So, I mean, I think it's a lot of how you look at it. And so if I'm there to help you hit your goals and you're hitting them, you're excited, I'm excited, kind of thing, for sure. But yeah, obviously, if I'm working with you now, if it's just like walking into 24-hour fitness and, some guy benches 405 that I've never met before, I'm happy for him, but it's not really going to like get me crazy excited, or like, I'm gonna like stop my day and journal about it or something.
Another aspect you were talking about on Table Talk, and I've seen a couple kids that were like this. I hadn't really noticed it till you guys were talking about it. You might see a kid whose max is pretty decent, and then his 85%, he can rep out for as many reps as he wants. But you might get another kid that has a higher max, but they're 85%, they're only good for five to six reps. How do you, is that just something that's set for those athletes, or is there a way to manage that where you can help the guy that's 85 for 15 reps increase his absolute strength?
You absolutely can't help them, but it's a lot of it is set. Like, you're kind of set up that way. Like, my son is like 11, just turned 11, and he is like super explosive. Like, been doing box jumps and stuff since he's like 5 years old. Crazy explosive speed. And like, I don't really have him lifting much yet, but like once in a while on bench, he do like a lot of body weight training. And like, I'm not like his like 60%, he could do like 8 reps for or something. It's weird because like there's some people, that's how I was more. I think there is obviously the point of like technique, where if you don't know how to get tight and stuff, you might be able to rep out like a sub maximal percentage, because you don't have to be as tight. You can get away with more kind of swirling around and things like that. But assuming your technique, we'll go into this assuming your technique is sufficient, because so we don't go down too far down a rabbit hole. So what you'd have to do at that point is, if somebody's the 15 rep guy at 85%, they generally need more volume, so they can just do more. They could do more intensity, they could do more volume, they could do more frequency. Where like, if someone's just like a fast twitch thoroughbred, they may not, like you tell like some of, like, just see the football, for example, you have some all-state running back that's just so fast. If they're really running their fastest each play, like they're told to do, and then their drills and stuff, they probably wouldn't walk for 3 weeks. I mean, there's no way they actually are, just because their tissue's so efficient that they wouldn't be able to recover. And that would apply to the weight room too. So, the advantage to being like the slower twitch guy, the slower gainer, if you want to call it that, is you can do more to combat it. You know what I mean? Because you can get away with doing, more work. And like, a lot of times that could sometimes be like, that's not always the case, but sometimes people can't gain weight and stuff. They could be that way, too. Sometimes they could get away with more volume, more nutrition, more calories that way. But I think a lot of it is what you can do. Like, so like, it's not always practical in the setting to be able to say, hey, you're doing like 5 sets, but you're only doing 2 because, you're a fast gainer, kind of like throw off the flow of 60 people in a small weight room. What I used to do is, I would, what I would do is they'd have their weights they're going to lift, like in the workout at Kennedale. It would be posted on a board. It would say, like, just say you're doing a squat. It would say, we're doing whatever, like 3 sets of 3. It's a heavier day. You're at all 3 sets at 315. Okay. So that's based off percentage. So I could tell you, like, okay, this person is like not getting anything out of this. So what I would do is like subtly bump their max up without them knowing. I wouldn't, because they just get a weight. They just know how much they got to lift. They're not seeing like an Excel formula or anything. So I just bump it up without them knowing. Also, a lot of times what I do with those kids is say, hey, you know what? You don't look like it's a challenge you very much. That's awesome. So how about in this last set? Let's see how many reps you can do and keep good form, and let them go an AMRAP, until they can't do anymore. Their form was about to break down, and stop them there. So there'd be like ways to combat. That's how you can combat it, like a huge group setting. Obviously, if you're working with someone one-on-one, which is more what I do now, it's a lot easier, because you just say, hey, we're gonna, change the program with these variables, and boom, do it, and that's that.
So you try to take advantage of the situation that they're in. You try to up them.
Oh, absolutely.
And then, yeah. So then the size, and then if they're a skinny kid, which that's where I notice it a lot, is in the smaller kids, the skinnier kids. So then now you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone, I suppose.
100%. The art of coaching comes in is, how do you find these subtle ways to do it without, like, in these group settings, of disrupting a huge flow? I mean, like, I've noticed in coaching, like when I was there, you'd have some people there, they're there for 30 years, are really good because they got better and better as they went on. Or you had other people there that were kind of bad probably to start with. And then by the time they're 25, 30 years, they're awful because, you're either going to, stagnation is a myth. You're either moving forward or backwards. And they're just experience doesn't necessarily, equate to competency or greatness. It could, a lot of times, it could be like you've dug yourself down like this like pit of negativity and you know just bad things, and I've seen that too.
You kind of get in that Charlie Francis idea of give the athlete what they need when they need it, and then you'll see them take off.
100%. Yep.
Now, I just got it and read it here before the interview. I would imagine it's probably the first one, Jailhouse Strong. What led you down that path? That's a really interesting book. It's
Sure.
It's awesome to read.
Okay, yeah. So first one, it was actually Metroflex Power Building Basics, and Jailhouse Strong was third one. I think is at a bench press science of that. Basically, that kind of goes back to my friend and I that I wrote it with. We so I was told he was managing that gym. He'd come in and work out too, and we would observe people in there, and we'd see people like like a lot of the strongest guys had all been to like jail, and the people that were kind of like training with the most like kind of intention, that were, let me take that back, the people that weren't really competing in bodybuilding and powerlifting, but like were in there with a purpose. Like they weren't jacking around, they were doing their thing. They're getting more of the results we thought were like more suitable, because like you see somebody bodybuilding, a lot of times they have a great physique, but they're not so functional. You see someone powerlifting, they were super strong, but they, had no kind of conditioning or that kind of thing. These dudes seemed like they had it going on. They were like strong, jacked, they can move, and they had like just a look that kind of like no nonsense, kind of like, and so we were just watch their training and talk to them, take notes. And then I actually started making some training programs for some of them then in high school, but I would get like I would watch a lot of stuff they would do. Like, for example, a mechanical advantage drop set on like incline dumbbell bench press. They would start the dumbbell bench press up like at 60 degrees, go to failure, drop to like 40, 45 degrees, then drop it like 10, 15 degrees. So what they would do, I don't know if they know what they're doing, but that's what Poliquin called it, is they would like, is once you hit failure at a certain angle, you can improve your leverage or mechanical advantage and continue that set on. So, talking to people in prison, there was not really any kind of like, you don't really like leave a station. Like you can't be like, oh, I'm going to superset cables with this and come back. Someone will take it. So they had to like necessity's mother invention. They had to like come up with all these ideas. So it was that kind of training, but then also kind of freeing yourself. The mindset part is freeing yourself of what current form of self-imprisonment you're in. It could be a dead-end job. It could be, like scrolling mindlessly on Instagram. It could be anything that's sort of imprisoning you and keeping you from the greatness that's in you. And how do you ignite this? Well, here's physical training is a tool that did ignite a lot of the mental, spiritual, all that in people. So they kind of improved in these other areas, because you'd be amazed at like, well, you work out, but like other people don't know that don't train. Like if you start training hard and eating right, how much better you feel. So that puts your mind in a better place. So then you have this kind of synergy of everything you do feels better. Like there are plenty of very successful people in all aspects of life that aren't really in shape, but I guarantee you they would feel better. And that they might be an anomaly, but generally when you get your act together physically, you start getting your act together more mentally and things too. People always think the other way around. Like, okay, if I do this and then physically, yeah, that works too for a lot of people. But the way I think you can free yourself from self-imprisonment is through hard physical training. Like if you're mindlessly scrolling nonsense that just makes you upset and you're not going to really do anything about, like people like, I remember during COVID, like, oh, there was, 11 hospitalizations in like Duluth, Minnesota. 2,000 miles away from there. What are you gonna do about that? You're not gonna do anything about it, but you could be training and make yourself feel better right now. And like, but by training hard and training with intention, you essentially have freed yourself from that negativity, and that can carry on to all aspects of life. I mean, even like you look what the military does, they get in shape right off the bat. I mean, they've been doing that for, various militaries throughout the millenniums have been doing that. I think they probably were onto something and figured that out. And it's crazy with all this technology tracking this and that people don't get back to that. They think they're going to go to like, eating donuts and go meditate with people they don't know in the woods, and then come back and like have their mind, all of a sudden better, and they're not probably. So.
And you kind of mentioned in there as I was reading the book, kind of looking through it, I'm not immune to that, but I really thought about kids. They live a jailhouse life minus the shanks and different things,
Yeah.
The violence, but they're in a classroom all day. They get a little bit of yard time to go practice their sport, come home, hit homework, eat a little bit of food. If they're on their phone a little bit, then it's bedtime. So society as a whole isn't that far removed from jail.
Well, especially during COVID, because it made people imprisoned like that, especially like, luckily for us, we did is like bought like property, out in the woods and stuff. So we'd go out and do fun stuff out there, but not everybody could do that. So like, then what happens if you're like in a 500 square foot apartment and, you can't go outside and stuff, or like even like the schools and stuff, they had kids like sitting 5 feet apart, like masks. It looked like I didn't send my kids to school during that. I homeschooled them because I saw pictures like, some kind of Chinese internment camp or something, and didn't want any part of that. So like, I just don't think that was good for their mindset. And I've noticed like right after COVID and, when people started going back to seminars and stuff like that, it was like crazy how like 16-year-old kids and 17, 18-year-old kids, because it started coming to these things, how passive and like kind of like weirder they didn't want to get driver's licenses and stuff. Like they were like, retreating to like their house on video games and phones. And it just like, it was like, like weird. Like it just wasn't like, when I was in high school, everybody go the day you turn 16 to get your license. Like, and it was just a different mentality. So I think a lot of that mental health stuff was huge. And then I think it just hasn't gone away yet. So it's not like, okay, that was a weird year and a half or whatever it was, and now we're all back to normal. And I don't think it's gotten back to normal. And I think even before that happened, it was kind of been headed that way for a while anyways.
Now, going through your Instagram, Jailhouse Strong, as you come down through it, you have quite a few posts on sprint training. How much sprint work do you do with your athletes? I think the post was of you running some hills, but
yeah, depends on what their goal would be. So I think one change I've kind of made, if someone wants to sprint or needs a sprint for what they're doing, is have them do it year round now. Cause like, like a lot of like heavier training, you'll back off season. Like, you might not touch a heavy weight for a while. You might focus more if you're a powerlifter on like kind of, muscle hypertrophy, work capacity, things like that. And then, but I think it's a little harder to break back into sprinting. So I always keep it in if that's part of someone's repertoire, at least once a week for sure, because I found out I got better results and it works better. So it really would depend on what the person's goals are and then how well they can recover from it too, because you always have to factor in like their lifting and all that stuff too. And so I'd have to go to case by case basis for sure, but it would just kind of depend. But I would say this, I figured out now, if you're doing that, you should be doing it year round. It's just because it's a pretty big jump to go, like Charlie Francis, he referenced earlier in one of his books, had mentioned the difference between 95 or 90%, I don't recall which one, and 100% is huge. When you think about that, if you're in condition to sprint, like if you said to me, like, hey, right now, like go run, down the street at 90%, okay, fine. I don't think anything bad's going to happen. 100% probably may, because I wouldn't be warmed up, but 90% is fast, but not so fast that like it's a real high risk. And I think that 100% when you're going your fastest is like something about the stress on the tissues and how the nerves fire and all that. If you're not ready for it, it can be bad. And especially a lot of people I work with have strength backgrounds because they want to kind of get into this stuff, but they know I come from a strength background too. It's not like a sprint guy that like looks down on lifting or whatever, doesn't think it's that important kind of thing. So we got to be careful because a lot of these people are really strong for their body weight. They have a very high strength body weight ratio. And one of the best predictors of sprint speed is your strength to body weight ratio. So like, you weigh 200 pounds and you squat 600, you can probably move really fast if you life or death situation, but there's also a really high probability you're going to tear a hamstring because they're not conditioned for that kind of turnover, that kind of speed, and you have the capabilities to turn it on. So that's a scary, it's like putting like a V8 in like a little, go-kart or something. It could be bad.
Now, you kind of touched on it there a little bit. Understanding your bias and overcoming your bias.
Right.
How was you able to kind of notice that maybe in yourself and then start kind of adjusting as you've coached longer and longer?
Sure. I noticed it, well, one, in myself, when I started really getting into sprinting again myself, I noticed that like how long it took, because I have good intuition of my body. And I noticed that like how long it took to break back into really being able to sprint well. And it wasn't being held back by ability or capabilities. It was being held back by like, I could feel if I turned it on, something bad was going to happen. And like, okay, it took like, a couple of years to really get back to doing it. And I didn't want to repeat that process. So then I started experimenting on other people and got better results that way. And like, it was interesting. Another thing I've kind of noticed is it's amazing. I used to think like you really couldn't get somebody really like that was not explosive. I think you can improve it a lot. But I have a guy, he's in the special forces and he's a wildland file. He's Green Beret. Been working on him since like 2010. And so we were started conditioning stuff because he was kind of into powerlifting. And it was back to conditioning kind of stuff. So I had him doing tempo runs, like Charlie Francis kind of stuff. And it was 100 yards. And I was like, we'll start at 15 seconds. That's, nothing, right? And like I didn't, like 10 or something, 90-second break to start off. It wasn't anything crazy. And he's like, I couldn't do it. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, was it like you're just not in shape to do it? He's like, I couldn't move that fast. He's like, I want my fastest. I'm like, you can't sprint 100 yards in 15 seconds? Like, really? Like, you've played rugby? No, and he couldn't. But now, dude, I mean, he's like, 4.740 or something. So I think there's a lot more potential there you can get out of people if they're in it for the long haul of like, okay, we got to really maximize the strength of body. His name's Harry Walker. He's on Instagram. I just posted a picture of him doing some kind of strong thing yesterday, before. But it's amazing if someone's committed long-term, you got to plan what you can actually get out of them.
Yeah. And that's why the Olympic cycle is what it is. It takes a long time to build an elite athlete.
Absolutely. So I think that's a good point to touch on. So that'd be another sort of change I've made lately is I've done like, the last few years is gone on to like kind of think of where you want to take the person long-term, but be a little more flexible in the day-to-day. So it's like okay, let's go this direction, but it's still programming day-to-day. It's like, people used to, I think, okay, here's your 4-year quadrennial cycle. And like, it's posted here. And like on this day, you're going to run, 80 meters and whatever. And then you'll be here. Okay. Well, what about, their grandpa died and they're gone for a week at the funeral and got suboptimal nutrition and training and threw it off. What about if this happened? What about the flip side is I've had it also where one guy I work with was doing a lot of private security, make a ton of money. And he really wanted to train. So he's like, okay, I got 6 months. I have nothing to do except train. So we're going to treat that a lot differently. And that was unexpected. Like whatever contract he got was not foreseen. It came up. They paid him a ton. We had a ton of time, got a ton of stuff done. And that was totally unforeseen. So you have to be kind of, it's like rigid in setting your goals, but flexible in your approach kind of thing.
Now, Louis used to talk about this, and I was going to get your opinion because we're kind of experimenting with some of it. But he would find ways to eat up kinetic energy to increase reversal strength, whether that be jumping off of a foam pad or his box squats into mats, something like that. How much can that improve this reversal strength and then build possibly on starting strength coming out of the box squat, things like that.
So explain how you do it again a little bit? Because I think I'm doing something similar with my kids sometimes.
Okay, so I just read his
Like a depth jump onto like a absorbing kind of surface, basically.
Well, he would jump from an absorbed surface. So like let's say you're going to do a box jump. He would set a foam pad down and then you would jump from the foam pad, so that now that pad you have to create more force because the pad's eating up so much force, and then jump. And then he talked about in his box squats, he would set foam on the box. So you're coming into the foam.
Oh yeah. You do those hassock squats.
Yeah. That way that pad's eating up kinetic energy. So now you have to create it from the bottom position to be faster and stronger. I didn't know if that was something you'd experimented with.
I've not experimented enough to have a strong opinion. So if he, like, say he advocated it and wanted me to come on and talk to him and advocate it with him, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. At the same time, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying it's stupid either, because I have done that some, but I don't think enough to conclusively like be sold one way or another yet. I did it some of my own training, those hassock squats, and we had another deal like that. I trained a guy named Paul Leonard. He's on Instagram. He's like an old school powerlifter when we still live out in California. And we did a lot, and he was really into that. So I did a lot of that with him. And I got stronger, and it did help. But then we switched a lot of things up and continued to get stronger. So I'm not sure. He had the best garage gym crew ever, dude. So I think we could have got away with a lot of stuff that may not have been optimal. It was the environment he created and the mentality of the people there. It was like one of those deals where you get like nervous and like, a ritual. It was about ice and squat down there, and it took it's 137 miles to drive there each way. So it'd take about 2.5 hours. So I'd always stop and eat breakfast. I'd leave really early in the morning to stop and eat breakfast at a certain spot, or get the exact same table, the exact same meal. I'd stop at the gas station to get a coffee, the exact same side. I mean, it was kind of scary because I was young and these guys were older and intimidating. And I always want to prove myself. So I had a whole ritual. And so I don't know really, because we had such a good thing going, that if the results were because of enhanced by that or not, because when we got away from that, they continued to improve. I probably should experiment with that though. That's a good, because I've done some sort of depth jumping that way that works pretty good, where you have a sort of surface that doesn't bounce you off, but kind of absorbs you. And we did get pretty good results with that. Kids, I didn't want them to do full on depth jumps, but they actually seem to help a lot. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Ronin box by chance.
I'm going to say no. And as you explain it, maybe
it's an adjustable box. You basically, can adjust it 1 inch increments from like 5 inches to 60 or 80 or something like that. And you can do it 1 inch increments. And the way he designed it is, it's rounded instead of like jagged edges. It's like a softer kind of material. It's not like rubber, but it's not full on metal either. It's like, so if you miss and hit your shin, it's not that big of a deal kind of thing. And that dude, what is it? Dr. Jake Pence. And he has all kinds of, and I was explaining this to him, and he had all sorts of, don't recall the person's name, that had done a lot of work on this. I'll have to find it for you and look, but had done more work on this, but more like I was talking about with the depth. I hadn't heard anybody doing it. Let's just try it. It seems easier in your joints. It's absorbing. It's a little bit harder. We're getting something out of it because we take it away. You can do more without it, but we should try that. Off of that, I'll be interested to see. That's a good idea. Like when some of that stuff plateaus, we need a little change. We would give that a shot. I have actually a perfect surface for that too.
Yeah, we've been jacking around with it. We have a 2 inch foam pad, so we'll do broad jumps off of it.
Yeah,
make sure it doesn't slide out from underneath them. So you set it against the surface and then do broad jumps off of them. We haven't been doing it quite long enough for me. I'm kind of like you. We haven't been doing it quite long enough to say, hey, this is helping.
For sure.
And plus they're young. It doesn't matter to a certain extent what you do. I think they're going to get better.
Yeah.
But, if we see a crazy jump in what broad jumps are doing, well, then maybe we can attribute it back to that.
For sure.
I'm not sure.
So where are you located at?
I am south of Kansas City, Missouri, about an hour.
Awesome.
So I know your time's getting short. You got so much stuff going on in your life, but I think we'll kind of go back to maybe the bench press thing in a way.
Okay.
With kids, it's they love that. So in taking
Yeah, of
that
course.
idea to everything else, 90% results for 100% enjoyment. At the end of the day, if you've got an athlete that's enjoying themselves, you're going to get better results.
100%. And even adults, unless somebody's like, hey, I'm going to be the best that ever did this particular endeavor, and we have to do. Okay, I'm like, look, this isn't going to be, all sunshine and roses. It's going to be like some stuff you don't want to do, and that's part of like that. But most people aren't, especially like with if they're not a powerlifter, it's just somebody training for strength for a sport. They don't have to set the powerlifting world record. So if you can get like 100% sellout buy-in at 90%, like you're saying, like that's kind of the magic of anything is when you can get somebody to do almost optimal, but 100% sustainable, then I mean, that you're ahead of almost about anybody at that point.
And with 100% enjoyment, they're there more
Yeah.
often.
Yeah. So exactly. Cause, that's the number one success to, key to success to a training program is adherence. And assuming it's a coherent, I mean, if something's crazy, it's crazy, but assuming it's like a good program or okay program, the adherence is like the number one principle to success. And, just because it's optimal doesn't mean it's sustainable. It's more if it's enjoyable and pretty close to optimal, it's often sustainable, then you get optimal results. So
And now maybe this would be the last question I got for you, and then we'll get
sure.
you on your way. But I know you're big on mindset, you're big on visualization, you're big on all those things. So helping the young athlete find their goals and envision it and work towards that goal. What kind of a process is that? Maybe even for a kid that doesn't believe he can get there, but he has some goals.
Yeah. So I would say you just use the right word, process. I would start them off with process goals of make their goals about you're not going to miss a workout. You're going to, do whatever. Like your goal is to hit 3,000 calories a day. Your goal is to hit 200 grams of protein a day. That kind of goal, they can take ownership over because if someone's not big on mindset and buying into goals, then all you do is like give them a goal they don't hit. That's not going to be helpful. Also, the issue with if someone doesn't have experience with a lot of mindset and goal setting stuff, you can develop a scarcity mindset because all when you're thinking about I want to bench 300 and you're not hitting it, all you're thinking about is not benching 300. So they're like not enjoying the process. We said, hey, I'm committed to bench pressing twice a week for the next 12 weeks. I'm committed to, going to bed by 10 o'clock, or whatever it is. You know, you may not even say you're going to sleep by 10 o'clock. You don't know, maybe lay down, you can't get to sleep, but you can make a goal to be in bed by 10 o'clock. You can make a goal to hit whatever. And I think you start people off setting goals with the process. And once they kind of master that and buy into that, then you could put more like, you know, I want to do like an outcome goal or whatever you want to do, kind of thing. Cause, or so I always say you want to start off with the process goals for sure.
I wish we would have got on this a little bit sooner because you said something in there that I really enjoyed talking
What's
about.
that?
That's that scarcity mindset. I think a lot of times coaches create that. And so if your team and practice and all of that is an economy, how you run
Yeah.
that is the economy you have. So if you run a kid to death or just condition the crap out of them and all that stuff, you create this scarcity mindset. Before you know it, you're in a depression and you don't even know how you got there. But your kids aren't going to they're not going to give up more energy freely because it's too valuable. So they're going to hold on to
No,
it.
they're going to do as much as they can not to get in trouble.
That's it. And you're going to practice at 70, 65, 70, 75%. And the coach is mad at the kids, but the coach created that environment by not understanding the scarcity mindset that everybody has.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of also like negativity too, of like, if a lot of coaches like listen to what they were saying to the kids and stuff, they like, I would say if you go one negative to one positive, you're probably still not going to have the person, optimally in the right mindset. You're going to be more like a 2-to-1 kind of thing, a 2-to-1 positive to negative, because I mean, there's like, yeah, you can create a culture of, I don't want to get yelled at. I don't want to get in trouble versus, I'm going to go for it. It's like, it's the process. You got to go for it. I mean, because you aren't going to, if you make them scared to take chances when it doesn't matter, they're not going to take a chance when the championship game's on the line. They have to win. I mean, but yeah, that's on you at that point. I mean, it's like an ATM. If all you do is withdraw and never deposit, like, you're going to be broken in the negative pretty quickly.
Well, Coach, I appreciate your time tonight.
I appreciate it, man.
And I know you got a lot going on, so to come on here and have a conversation about some of these things it's really awesome for me. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, buddy.